open book?
Open book?
Do you want an open book while we're recording?
What's that?
Those are some pretty cool socks. What brand is that?
Stance socks. I do so many just fun socks through there. I've got like Elf and like Step Brothers and
my brother-in-law has those socks. Me, I just try to figure out what socks like fit the shoes.
Right, so they don't go up above. Yeah. Because that's where I have the white Vivos, and if you wear black socks, like they look different. I was like, oh shit, I have to get different colored socks now. Yeah, and honestly, these are just. See, the thing is, I started recording too, but I feel like a lot of people don't realize, like, especially like if you're athletic, how fast you go through socks. And I don't know, maybe so. Do the expensive socks, are they actually worth it? Because like I bought like Nike socks like back in the day, like working out, and like they would like lose like their elasticity within like a couple months. They would lose their color. These aren't bad. I'll notice over time sometimes like a hole in the toe or the heel, but I mean I wear them fairly regularly, and I've had them for years now. So I think they're worth it. They're a little expensive for a pair of socks, but they last. You know what I mean? Like my typical ones, like I'll get like the cheaper Adidas, Nike ones, and just you run through them after how many months, and then that's it. Yeah, which I'm fine with.
Well, welcome Gainz Nation. Thanks for joining us. I said joining us. As you can tell, I'm rocking the short shorts while he's rocking these nice pants.
Some Lulus.
It is actually pretty. I do have a pair of Lulus. Are those the ABC ones?
Oh yeah.
Yep. I have this. I think mine's like the darker blue. It's like
they start to wear out a little bit over time. But
speaking of which, if you guys are listening and watching, if you guys want an alternative brand to Lululemon, I just found a pair at Target. Don't sleep on the All in Motion brand.
Dude, I have the hoodie. I got the exact same hoodie, different color I have there, and it's like the same thing.
Yeah, I just bought another pair of pants because I know, like, especially with winter, fall coming around. Obviously, we're in Illinois, so we had to prepare for those seasons. But I just found like their pair for like I think it was like $40, where I think the ABCs are like $125 without discounts, obviously.
Right.
But it was about the same. I tried them on and I bought them. I bought like a great pair, and they feel nice.
I like them.
Now I don't know how long it's gonna last. I mean, I've had like the Lulus for like a year now, and they still look brand new and feel brand new.
All my sweats from there and everything, like shirts last. They last forever. Like
they
last a very long time. That is the nice thing.
I was the biggest hater on Lulu probably for the longest time too.
I was too.
Because I just don't, I don't know, maybe I'm just a cheap guy, but like also I'm wearing a blank tee. It's a true classic. Those are like $25 plain t-shirts. Right. But like I was always like, you know, what am I going to, like most of the stuff is like workout clothes. Yeah. I found like these stringers that I like, they were like $7 instead of like the $30 stringers or whatnot. Yep. And then like shorts, but yeah, I'm not going to lie. Once I got my first pair of Lulus, I was like hooked. And then so I'll maybe try out more of their stuff, right?
Yeah. I thought it was bougie at first. I started getting like polos, Lulu. Like I got a lot of it for like the clinic stuff because they have like it's mobile, it's loose, it lasts a long time. Yeah. So I think time and place for it. Like if you're just getting regular shirts to wear, they're like $50-$60. Probably not worth it. Probably not worth it.
Well, welcome again, guys. Like I said, we do have Dr. Kyle Richmond on here today. He's been on here, but why don't you just do a quick introduction, and then we'll kind of talk about what's going on in the background and what you're doing right now. Okay. Because just in case if this is the first time listening, but if you guys haven't checked it out, we did do the first episode, I believe it was like 10 or so episodes ago. It was like episode 59, 60. So glad to have him back on again, but if you want to just do like a quick introduction so people know who you are, and then we'll kind of get into other things too.
For sure. Okay, so Dr. Kyle Richmond, I'm a chiropractor, but more of the treating like a PT. So a lot of people hear chiropractic and go, okay, you just adjust everybody, see you later. It's more of a one-on-one style, hour-long initial visit, half-hour follow-ups, giving you the stuff to do at home type of deal, teaching you kind of what's going on. So I kind of tell people, hey, chiropractor treats like PT. Deal with a lot of athletes. I deal with a lot of high school, junior high, college athletes, all the way to 90-year-old grandparents. Like, there's a huge spectrum, and that's the biggest confusion. Like, if you see what my treatment room looks like, you see a barbell, a squat rack, dumbbells, bands, all these things, which it's a sliding scale. Some people might use those, and I get people all the way in the 80s and 90s that just need movement, because that's the biggest thing when it comes to treating people at this point, or life in general. And that's what you guys promote, is it's movement. Yeah. So again, chiropractor, I've been in it for almost 2 years now. I graduated in October of 21. And as of, end of August of 2023, I have now opened my own clinic here, rebuilt Strength and Rehab in Frankfort off of Laraway and Lagrange.
Yeah, and also too, him and I have been talking this whole time. He's been teasing me this whole time. He wasn't giving me any secrets and whatnot, but we kind of knew in the background he was going to do something really big. And this is exciting news. I mean, like you were saying, 2 years in the business, and you've got your own place. Well, why don't we talk about like what you want to see this place, what you want to do, what brings people here, what do you want to do, and what do you see in this future for this place?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing, I have to thank everybody that none of this would have been possible. It wasn't for, my parents, my girlfriend, her family. I mean, I had people come and help me that I wouldn't even expected that did more than I can ever thank them for. So first off, I have to thank all those people. They're incredible. What I want to see with this space, now I have the opportunity where I get to build my own brand and a little bit of the control of that and saying, here's how I want to be perceived by the public. Because that's the biggest thing, right? You hear chiropractor, and I had some the other day, like, chiropractor, hate chiropractors. I'm like, well, hold on a second. Like, here's what this is. I'd like to promote it more as, if you have any sort of movement issues, pain, aches, anything like that, this is the place to go, right? And kind of rebrand it where people don't even know it's a chiropractic office. Like, I still can adjust and manipulate, which is a powerful tool when I use it. Yeah. People still love that. They're going to come in for that, and rightfully so. But I want to brand this as like a place for not only just athletes, but for your typical desk workers, to people who are in the trades, to people who are just retired and want to live life, healthy and strong. So my goal is, I don't have a certain number of patients I want to hit. I don't have a certain amount of money I need to make. I want to make this just my brand and something that I feel proud of having. Yeah. And I think that's my biggest thing. If I keep the patient as the center of my focus, I think it's going to flourish, and that's the biggest thing.
So I know you showed me like the back room. Did you want to? Can you talk about that, or do you want to talk about like for the athlete side of things too?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Go ahead.
So this whole facility, it's called now the Patriot Center. So it's on Laraway in Frankfort. It's attached to a big sportsplex, which has indoor volleyball. It used to be indoor soccer. Some of you guys might remember. I played here, 20 years ago. Yeah, played indoor soccer here.
I think my wife played down the street at Roma.
Oh, Roma, yeah, that's over here too. Yeah,
I remember that.
So this facility has volleyball courts in there. We're going to try to get other athletes and sports in here. But that's a big opportunity I have, is when I treat an athlete, I can take them out there, whether it's pitching, hitting a volleyball, kicking a soccer ball, whatever it is. There's a big opportunity for that. And then I'll kind of tie in all the rehab with all the sports stuff there.
Yeah, and I saw the facility behind it. I honestly didn't even know you had that. So like,
most people don't. I had the guys do the video the other day, and they're like, "Why didn't you show us that?" I was like, "I just forget." Yeah,
so maybe Kyle will, produce something where he could show the facility a little bit more, if obviously you're able to. But this is like something great, because like when he was saying like high school athletes, college athletes, or even like post like collegiate athletes, like say if you love indoor soccer, say if you play in an adult soccer league, and that's something that's like a side passion for you that you'll never stop doing until like you can't anymore. Like, I'm pretty sure Kyle will be totally fine with having you as a patient to go ahead and make that goal happen, right?
Well, what I tell most people is they don't stop playing the sport usually because of time. It's because their body is like, all right, my knee hurts, my shoulder hurts, or I'm scared to get hurt, right? Yeah. So I do a lot of the preventative care where it's like, you're going to go play soccer. Well, I'm going to make sure your knees, hips, ankles, everything move really, really well, because I always like to say I can't prevent injury, I can mitigate injury. Yeah. So what that means, you roll over your ankle, instead of being a grade 3 sprain, it's probably a grade 1, you're back on your feet within 5 days. So the biggest reason people stop is because they're afraid of injury or they are injured. And I think you see a lot of people that continue to play these sports, or even it's like you just go and play in a local league or a co-ed thing. You can do that all up into your 70s, 80s, and you get people. You see, there's incredible stories of people in their 90s still moving and doing things.
Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
Did you see that video?
Phenomenal. So
people were trolling him in the comments. They're like, "Holy cow! The Seattle Seahawks are going to be absolutely terrible because their QB1's Pete Carroll. Like, they don't have Russell Wilson anymore. Or Geno Smith can't do the job Pete Carroll has to step in."
Pete Carroll's in. Yeah. No, it's hilarious because you do see like people at that age. It's like mind blowing that they can still do it, but it's only once you stop you lose it.
Yeah.
Tell people it's the law of specificity, or like use it or lose it. Mm-hmm. If you stop reaching your arm overhead, well, eventually your body's not gonna allow that to happen anymore. But if you do this every day for the rest of your life, you're not gonna lose that. It's the same concept. Like people all of a sudden go to a sedentary lifestyle and they stop moving.
Yeah, that's like the biggest fear, especially like what people I know who like retire. When you said like loss of movement and whatnot, I mean, if you think about it, like someone who did like a labor intensive job, they go from doing that for 30 years and then for the last 20 years after retirement, they've just been sitting on a couch, sitting on a chair, hanging out, sleeping, playing some golf here and there, but like they don't force themselves to even like bend over to grab something.
Right.
So I think that's very important that you said that. For the one, I did want to ask you one more question before we move on. I know you said a lot of it's like preventative care, but I want to kind of ask you, so what if like a patient, and I know you kind of went over this in the first episode too, but what if it's like someone who wants to play soccer instead of like preventative care, like say if like their knee hurts, but what if they came into you and asked you like, hey, I want to keep playing soccer for the past 20 or for the next 20 years. Mm-hmm. What are the things that I need to do to either strengthen myself or, get in those positions to play soccer for 20 years instead of like something that, they're 100% true to being, they don't hurt.
Right.
What is your answer on something like that? And I know, like I said, you talked about it, but since you were talking about preventative care, I want to kind of hit the other side of things, like 100%. Longevity, all that good stuff.
So I always break care down into like 3 areas, right? It's like acute pain, then there's kind of like the stiffness, issues, soreness, whatever, and then it's like, okay, strength and a return to play, right? So most people, I'll get them out of pain. They're okay, making sure things move well. Okay, now it's strengthening. So that's probably a better way. Pain, move better, now strengthen. Most people kind of fall into that strengthening where they maybe have all the range of motion they need, but they don't ever do these things, right? Okay, I don't ever load my leg, because I'd say majority of people don't even actually go to the gym and do strength training, right? Well, we know that's a great precursor in order to go and play sports. So I'll work with someone like that. Okay, your knee has all the rotation it needs, it has all the extension, flexion. Well, let's load it and get it stronger. Let's put it in positions that we know, hey, most ACL tears are because it's a plant and rotate injury, like of their knee. Well, most people don't ever train knee rotation. There's a good way that you can actually get an ACL tear. Again, not saying we mitigate or we prevent it all, but so someone like that would come in and I build a plan around how do I get you from point A to point B? Because my biggest thing is defining both of those. Get an assessment, determine where you are, and have an actual goal of where I need to have you be. Right? Because if I just get you in and say, okay, your knee doesn't move well. Okay, what do I need it to be? I have to define that. Otherwise, we're just doing random treatments in here and hoping that we throw enough darts at the board that something lands.
Yeah, so you're kind of doing it at a guided pace instead of something where, like you're saying, throwing darts at the board, because you kind of want that overall layout and that structure, and you have that background information to kind of go through that, correct?
Yes, because most people, like if it's tissue adaptation, right? If you're lifting, you don't go to one session in the gym and all of a sudden you got bigger biceps, right? I tell people, if I want to get you stronger, give me 4, 6, 8, 12 weeks. But what that means, and a huge difference in what I do, typical chiropractic, you're in there, or PT, you're in there 2-3 times a week for weeks on end. I want to see you on day 1. I want to see you maybe a week after that. And I want to start spacing things out, because the biggest thing for you is you going home and doing these things, right? You getting stronger, you exposing your tissues to these things. You come back, it's like a check-in. How are we doing? Are we progressing? Cool. I'm going to put you the next step of this program. Because in my head, I have the whole program laid out, and I want to make sure I clarify to you that you're not coming in here doing the same thing day in and day out. Right? Once that knee's strong enough in this position, let's challenge it here. Let's increase the weight. Let's increase the range of motion that I have in there. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, because it's kind of like, back to my bodybuilding roots, it's like a progressive overload. It's
exactly. All tissue responds to that.
So the key here is just progressive overload everything, and you'll succeed.
Anything in life, no matter what, even if it's reading and writing, just progressive overload.
That's pretty funny, because if you do one bicep curl and then by the time you're not living, you've done 100,000, your biceps should be a little bit bigger, right?
A little bit, we'd hope. Trying here.
But awesome. Well, thanks for that little introduction on that. I'll put in the show notes too, where you can find this place, the location.
Appreciate that.
And also, like, say if someone's not from Illinois or local, do you do any like virtual clients as well?
I do a lot now, especially with like acute neck, low back. People would be surprised with, at least I can get them out of their acute pain and then give them the stuff they need. I do a lot of coaching online for people who want more mobility work, because that's the biggest thing I've tried to find out is how do I scale this to the masses for people who aren't here, right? Because people are always going to want to work with you, but not everyone's right in your backyard. So I do a lot for virtual, but then I also know, hey, let's say you're in Arizona, I'm going to help reduce things as much as I can, but I'm going to try to find you a provider that I trust in your area, because I have a couple searches for ways that I treat that I can kind of guide you. Because again, you pull up Google and there's a list, right?
Yeah.
Who do you go to? Who do you trust? So I at least try to help with that as well.
Yeah, because that was probably like my last question, because I don't even know if we got into that last time about virtual, which I don't even know if you were doing virtual before.
It's gotten a lot busier as of lately, which is great.
Yeah, because I just obviously, people watching this, they're not all going to be in the south side of Chicago. And Frankfort is pretty much, 30 minutes from the city?
At least,
30 minutes from the city. So if that gives you a good area of where Frankfort, Illinois is, and not Frankfort, Kentucky, because every time you look up Frankfort, it pulls
Dude, every time I'll put like, we're looking for food or something, food near Frankfort. It's like, no.
It's like Frankfort, Kentucky. That must be a pretty
it's gotta be busy.
Pretty busy damn city to be always popping up on your search. But that's good. We'll go ahead and put that in the information if you want to reach out to Kyle, if you want to get, online sessions or something local or, a consultation where...
Well, that's what I tell everyone. Hey, feel free to message me. We'll make sure you have social media, my phone number, email. I'm always willing to talk to somebody because sometimes that's half the battle is let me just listen to what your case is and I'll tell you if I can help you or not. I'm not going to lie to you and be like, I think. I'll know where I won't know, or I'll help get you to where you need to be. Feel free to reach out with any questions whatsoever.
Yeah, and then if you're local too, and I played around with it before coming here today, but your booking site on your website is pretty easy going.
So I try to make it super easy. So it's right, click, done. Okay.
Yeah, I know we probably should move on, but do you want to quickly go over how the booking would set up? If they for some reason are kind of shy, they can't call you, they want to just book something and come here and talk to you then?
Yeah, so on my website, www. Did anyone even say that anymore? Or maybe not. rebuiltstrengthandrehab.com. It's on my initial site. I have the full one coming soon, but you'll see book here. You click on that, I'll bring you to the software that does the booking.
Yep.
All you gotta do is click new patient. I have a virtual option as well. You click that, find your time. Now it will have you put your credit card information in, because another thing I want to touch on with people is I'm a cash-based practice because insurance limits the amount of time and things I can do.
Yeah.
So it's a little different. Again, that's something you can talk about later. But you go on there, find your time, put your information in, and it's a done deal.
Yeah.
So I make it fairly easy. But we'll touch on we can touch the insurance cash thing at another time. But
I think you kind of talked about that in the
briefly.
Previous one.
Yeah, just because they really do dictate. If you've been to a chiropractic office before, most often there's a bunch of tables lined up. It's a big room. You're one of 3 or 4. It's click, crack. See you. You've only been there 5, maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I want to spend a half hour with you or hour, teach you everything I need to teach you. You walk out here knowing exactly what's going on, and I see you a handful of times.
Yeah.
Now, there's stuff I do work with people maintenance-wise where they come in once every 4, 6, 8 weeks because we can always improve, just like having a personal trainer, right? But the acute stuff, it gives me a lot more freedom to make that a quick thing versus no one wants to go to the PT for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
No one wants to go there 3 times a week for 6. It's like a job at that point.
Yeah, it's and I don't. I've never had that experience with PTs, but what I've heard is that's the biggest pain. It's you're doing the job, and then when you get out, you kind of lose it because you don't really retain it because it's you feel like it's work. And it's not really an open-ended conversation or a coaching strategy.
Yes.
It's more let's make sure you do this no matter what, and that's it. And then half the time people don't even do it afterwards.
Right.
And then they fall into the part where it's oh, I can't flex my knee or extend my knee as much because I don't do anything anymore.
Right.
So
because I always want you to have the tools. I'm hey, if we decide this is your last visit for now, you know everything you got to do when you leave this office. Because I say, do you know what the number 1 cause of low back pain is?
from?
It's just a trick question. It's previous low back pain, right? So if you've had low back pain, you're more susceptible because usually you're going back to the same thing. Yeah. So I teach someone an exercise and go, hey, if low back pain comes up again in a year or two, probably do this again. You're going to feel a million times better.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of the big difference there.
Yeah, it's kind of like restructuring your brain to move in that pattern, and then sometimes you might get out of groove, and you just got to retrain it, right?
Right. Once I say, like, hey, if you want to go learn how to squat, are you going to go to a group fitness class or are you going to hire a trainer? Like, if you want to get a good back squat, right? You're probably going to hire a trainer, right? It's more of a one-on-one thing versus going in, like, I'm not going to sign up for a group fitness class if I want to learn how to do a one-arm X back squat.
And that's the biggest thing. I've actually done, like, not to hate on CrossFit or functional fitness.
That used to be. That was me.
Yeah, not to hate on it, right? Because in my opinion, I'm a little bit. I thought I'm a little bit better off than going to those sessions than some people. But unfortunately, when you only have one or two coaches coaching a 20 group class, it's hard. I mean, I remember going to like the friends and family sessions and like, cause I know a bunch of coaches and trainers when it comes to like functional fitness. Cause that's why I say functional fitness, because if you say CrossFit, sometimes those aren't CrossFit affiliate gyms.
Right.
And I mean, not that I would get in trouble, they would, because that's not my liability.
Right.
But like you could see like half the class was moving improperly pretty much the whole time. And not saying all of them were doing it at the same time. They were doing it at different times. Like say if we had to do like a simple row on the rowing machine, a squat, a pull up, things like that. You would see people like move wrong here, maybe move a little bit weird there. So it just like you back to your point. It's just like maybe if you need to do something first, or if you want to get like a back squat, maybe you should get that one-on-one or a coach or a trainer or whoever it is, an expert in that area first before you start going to a group class.
Right. You can expedite the process, right? You're like, hey, I can learn this squat or whatever it is. That's why I kind of relay it back to like treatment, right? It's like, let's get that low back pain figured out really quick, which I think a lot of people are under the misconceptions. Like, I have low back pain, I'm going to live with it, and it's going to take forever to heal. Yeah. 90% of the low back pain I treat is they respond very, very fast and favorably. Yeah. Those few ones that don't, you put them in the right place and they get the right treatment, right? But again, like I used to coach CrossFit. I remember that. You'd have 15 people and you're like, how do I make everyone happy and make sure they're moving well? Because if I'm watching you for these 5 minutes, I don't know what's going on over here. Yeah. So like I still
miss a whole 5 minutes.
Yeah, you miss a whole 5 minutes, right?
How many people in that 5 minutes too? Mm-hmm.
Again, nothing wrong with that whole amount, but like if your goal is like, I know I don't move well, I need help, you got to hire out to something a little more individualized.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty great that you brought it back to that. But back to the Porsches, the Lamborghinis, the Civics, the Camrys. Oh, I mean cars. Sorry, I thought this was
wrong cars.
Automotive mechanics podcast. But that's the topic of the day that we want to talk about today, and something that's really good that you've been doing, and something that's amazing. And, I've tried some of them, and, I sent them to Kyle before I even posted about it. I'm like, hey, like, I know this is probably embarrassing, but, like, check this out. Like when I did, like, the hip flexion one or the extension with, like, knee extension. And then I did the one where we were kind of on the ground and you were, like, moving your hip and not moving. So why don't we talk about that, and like if you don't mind giving an introduction, and then obviously we'll get more details out of it too as well, because this is something that like people like me, I'm a powerlifter, bodybuilder, not a professional by all means. I did do that whiskey and deadlift competition.
I saw that. It was good.
And also my back doesn't my back doesn't hurt. So good. That means maybe I'm doing something right. So right. But yeah, awesome. Why don't you give us like a quick definition or define what our cars are?
Yes, because that's something I really want to do better with on social media. Is like a lot of people see me and go, "You're the cars guy," or like I know cars, but it's hard for people to really see and define it, right? So I'm gonna try to do that.
And then also, we'll get into. Well, actually, why don't you do this, and then I'll probably have another question afterwards.
Okay. Follow up with it. So CARS stand for Controlled Articular Rotations. It means a big joint circle. Okay, so why that's so important is because we want to be able to move our joints independent of other joints. And that's how I use an assessment. If you go to move your shoulder and your whole body moves with it, well, now you're not using just your shoulder, right? So CARS have a myriad of ways I can use them. The biggest one I use them for is assessment of a joint and then a warm-up. Okay, I think one thing to differentiate, you don't do cars to increase your mobility. You do it to maintain what you currently have. There's a bunch of other things we gotta do to increase mobility, because you just jamming your shoulder into more and more rotation isn't gonna give you more, right?
Yeah.
There's a training aspect to that. So cars are all the things that you see me put my joint into its full range of motion, usually a big circle. Now there's other things you've seen like lift-offs, hovers, where I'm just going linear, like one thing. That's a whole nother aspect. That's more of the training style. Now cars itself, you have warm-ups.
We won't touch on that much.
No. That's where we're not going to.
We'll tease it out.
But that's why we'll say, hey, there's cars and there's all the other stuff, all the FRC stuff. But cars themselves, I can use it for someone has an acute ankle sprain, just starting to get movement in the joint. I can use it to warm somebody up. I can train those in themselves. You'll see me take a dumbbell and go through a full shoulder car, or put a weight on my leg and do a hip car. So it's a trainable thing too. That's the fun thing. You can have, you'll love it, where you see guys like, there's powerlifters and bodybuilders or high-level competitors, they'll take through weighted cars and their whole body is just like, they've never lifted a weight before.
Yeah,
so you can make it rehab-based, sliding scale, all the way from rehab all the way to training.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, so why don't you get into like the rehab side of things first, and then we'll kind of go in maybe like training methods. But the one thing you were talking about too is the mobility piece, because you do differentiate like a bunch of times in your posts is like, this is not mobility training, these are cars. Yes. Why don't you give us like a reason why you do that? Because I've been noticing it, you do it quite often. So I feel like you need to get a point across, and you're trying to, and you keep doing it because it's important to you, or maybe people mistake it, like what you're talking about. So why don't you kind of go through what people are mistaking, or like maybe people are not understanding correctly?
100%. And there's a lot of people in the industry go back and forth on this stuff, but I think if we can start to differentiate these two main topics, it's flexibility and mobility. Yeah. Flexibility on this side is your passive range of motion. So it's how far I can take your shoulder into something without you moving. Your mobility is the active control part of that. Where people get confused is they say, I want to increase my hip mobility. Yeah. They sit in the bottom of a squat, or they take a band and they just hang out in a stretch. Yeah. Well, the law of specificity means if you're doing something passive, you're going to get passive results in return. So like a lot of not to bash yoga, but I treat a lot of yoga people because they're very flexible, but they don't have the control. Like I can get their arm in this crazy position, but if you tell them to produce force
get in that position,
and get there, it's harder for them, right? So they're not strong there. So that's why if I differentiate those two, and that's why my treatment and assessment is so important, I can really help fix your problem, because you get people who go, I have hip pain, I stretch my hips, and you go and you look, they can't move their hip into inter-external rotation. But I can bring them there passively. Well, you need more mobility. And I think, you see with, but CrossFit does a lot of like the banded lat stretch. kickstart was great with all that stuff. Yeah. But it's only for a time and place. If you're using it to warm up, awesome. If you're saying I want to get better at putting my arm overhead, well, I'm going to put you in that position, make you create force and produce strength there, right? Because you have something called your minimal voluntary contraction. It's how much force you have to put in a muscle to see change. It's like 70% to get strength changes. You don't get stronger by taking a 1 pound dumbbell and doing 100 reps. Yeah. You create hypertrophy, but to get stronger, you have to produce force. So if you hang out in a pigeon stretch all day, if I just do this, well, my hip's only going to get more flexible. Yeah. I have to actively do something to get mobility. And people definitely go back and forth on it. There's the active, and you get like dynamic flexibility, active flexibility. But if you just differentiate those two, it clears up a lot of confusion for people.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm glad you brought up like something like the lat stretch from like the band or the barbell, because like that's like, and I'm not gonna go through like my situation, but like something like that is like maybe something how I'll warm up my lats to get myself into like the back barbell squat, and that could be something where I just need to get that area warmer. Right, not to say that's the whole picture, right? I don't want to give. I feel like people will take it and they're like, well, that's all he does to get ready for a squat? No, there's a lot more to it. But you did mention at the end there, like you mentioned a lot of like the terms like NASM uses or like ACE, because I've studied and learned, read so much of that like on the personal training side. You said active, passive, dynamic. So a lot of those terms probably will confuse people. But I want to ask you, like, how closely or not close is like something like dynamic warm-ups or dynamic stretching which is typically preferred for someone that's going to get into like a hypertrophy or a strength session instead of like a passive stretching or a static stretching.
Right.
So how closely is dynamic like warm-ups or stretching referred to like cars, or how can they intertwine with each other?
Good question. So if you're using a dynamic warm-up to just get ready for something, awesome. You can get your arm a little higher. If you're using that to increase your mobility, you're missing the mark.
Yeah.
You're not increasing, because what I want to see is like, okay, every time you do your squats, you have to do this lat thing, right?
Yeah.
I want to get you to the point where your baseline is you have lat mobility.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why my training gets you to the point where you're cold, right? You come in the gym and you can, boom, I can do this no problem. Or you can move your wrist however you need to. A lot of people confuse and say, I'm going to do all my mobility training. I'm going to do leg swings and kicks and all these things. Yeah, you get warm, so you're at your baseline. But if I want to take that baseline and increase it, there's mobility training, which is like strength training. Like I'll get people in here, like we'll do rotational stuff for the shoulders and get them through all this joint training, and they're sweating and they're like getting the same benefits of a true workout, because it does take work in strength training. So dynamic stuff is awesome. I still use it like before I run and things like that. Cars are a very similar thing. I'm just warming up my whole joint and its range of motion. I'm not expanding, I'm not improving it, but I'm getting ready for it. So they're all great. Static stretching I still do like before certain things. There is research that shows it is beneficial. We used to think like, if you're going for your 1 rep max back squat, is today the time to stretch a bunch? No, but your typical like hypertrophy stuff, like you can stretch all the time.
Yeah, so that's a lot of good information right there.
I
just say that's a lot. That's why some of the questions will be like some bits and parts. But no, that's a great example, because like, see, the thing is, when you're defining these things, and I think a lot of people like who's obviously been working out and who don't get hurt often do sort of these things, because like, see, the thing is, since I am not really, and like I said, this is where you listen to honest people, because I'm not as knowledgeable in this stuff. And when I hear you define like cars and dynamic stretching, like most of the time I'm doing most of the stuff already before or after training sessions. And I'm, like he said, like hypertrophy movements don't necessarily need so much, because you're not really like, when have you seen someone tear their bicep on a bicep curl machine or a rope curl?
Right.
It's more or less like they didn't warm up for a 500-pound deadlift, and then they didn't, the rotation on their arms were messed up, or they were very tight, and then all of a sudden they tore their bicep, or they're pulling at a pace that they shouldn't have in the first place. So I'm glad that it kind of clears it up for me too, because like some of the things that I do before training sessions, and someone like me who's only 29. And I know you're 28, right?
28, almost 29, yeah.
There you go. So we're pretty much the same age, not to age us or anything, but like the idea of all this stuff makes so much sense, because in the beginning, when I was in college, high school, and I wasn't training so seriously, I never did a bodybuilding show, I never did a powerlifting meet at that time. A lot of the stuff, like, I didn't do any of this. Like I didn't do any of like the movement, like the cars or the dynamic stretching as much as I do now. And like most of the time, and this is like a side rant, right? Obviously this is not a question at this point.
Love it.
But most of the time, like when people talk to me about like general like lifting and like general health and like injury, most of the time they don't want to hear it, but it's what I do before or after the training sessions. When I ran that marathon in January, people always were like, how bad did your knees hurt? How bad did your knees hurt? And I said, never.
Right.
I maybe had soreness, which is like...
As you should if you ran a marathon, right?
Yeah, because like you're pretty much going to inflame some muscles when you're doing stuff like that. Like when I ran like 20 miles, like, yeah, my knees felt a little sore. Yeah. But like, no, it was gone within like a day or so, kind of like working out. Like when you have DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. Like it's kind of like that. So I'm kind of glad, because I feel like this conversation will kind of clear up, because a lot of people ask me that. And like when I tell them, I point out someone like you, or point out someone like, like Squat University, because you and Kelly Thread are like the three people I pretty much like watch when it comes to like the before and after training sessions, because I think it's important that we get someone to the point where they don't have to ever worry about like, why the heck why can't I move my shoulder past like my head? Why can't I do this? Like, and it's always that another thing too with like the bodybuilding industry. It's like, oh, I was able to, squat all the way ass to grass, or I was able to reach over my head. And then when I got so big and strong, I wasn't able to do it. So it's like, well, maybe you just didn't take care of yourself in those 10 or 15 years, right?
Right. And that's where I come in. It's like, okay, we have to back out and zoom out and say, what's the overarching goal? Is it for you to grow old and be able to move, or is your goal strictly performance right now? And still, if it's still performance, I want to come in and be able to help you keep all that range of motion, that strength as you're progressing through this. Yeah. And where I come in is like, okay, hey, I want to make sure I differentiate all these things for you, give you the few things you need to work on, and tell you when to do it. Because most people go, yeah, I know I need to stretch, don't know when. Don't know what, don't know how. Yeah. Right? I want to make it because you don't have to be doing mobility. I think that's the big thing. People think you got to be doing mobility all day long, all the time. If you stop, you'll lose it. I get people to the point where they have all the range of motion they need. All they do is cars to maintain it. That's the biggest thing. There's something called the morning routine, which people can, I'll send the link for. It's cars for the entire body. It takes, once you're good at it, 5-6 minutes a day. If I move my neck this way, good, and then the other way, each single morning, I'm going to keep that. And that is how I maintenance all my joints throughout life, because you use them. But I tell most people, how often do you do this with your neck? Probably never. Well, guess what? After 40 years, you're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to reach behind. You're not going to be able to get in the bottom of a squat. Yeah. So that's the maintenance aspect of it all. Yeah,
it's always when you said like putting your head back, and I do that like every sauna session. Like I just sit there because the fact that, we're so, forward movement these days. Mm-hmm. And like, I was a gamer back in the day, work on a computer, on my cell phone, everything. It's like, it's one of those things where like when people see me like sit like this, it's probably because the fact that like maybe I was sitting incorrectly for a while, and I'm just trying to, trying to balance it out per se.
Dude, that's literally when I treat people for like neck and back pain. It's like, we know everything in life is here. We have to balance stuff out. And give them like the teeter-totter explanation, right? This amount of bending you're doing, this amount of going backwards. You got to kind of level the playing field. So you're spot on with that.
Yeah, and we actually did, when you brought up the neck, we actually did an episode on neck extension and flexion and like rotation and all that. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I saw that. I liked it. That was good.
I don't know how much you could critique it, but I want to get back to what you were saying about cars, about the rehab side and like the training side.
Yes.
Can you define those two, and then like kind of maybe give examples, like not the whole example, like the whole way you produce this information, but give some examples on what you would like, see like for client A and client B, which is rehab, which one's training. Like what would you kind of switch things up?
Okay, so the number one rule I have with cars, and this is for everybody, is they're never meant to go into a painful motion.
No.
I say never. There's a time and place, but most of the time, I like ankle sprain for a good example. You sprain your ankle, it's blown up. The first thing you're going to do is just try to get some motion in there, and this might be the extent of your cars. As we're doing that, the cars at a low level for a rehab perspective help pump out the bad stuff, help put the good fluid in there. It gives your brain information of what's going on, because your brain doesn't know what's happening. It gets skewed anytime pain and inflammation happens. So as rehab, we start just getting motion to a joint, because the worst thing you can do is after an injury is completely immobilize it. We notice that with people, unless something's completely torn, but you'll see people want to say, okay, I can't use my elbow anymore now that it hurts. Yeah. And all of a sudden they can't ever do this again, and they don't have the motion.
Yeah, I real quickly, I stubbed my toe really badly the other day, and I couldn't even like bend it back and forth.
Yep.
And I was taking my finger because I was moving it forward, backwards, even though it was kind of painful, like you were saying. Like sometimes you need to kind of, that pain subject's a little bit, different obviously with different things, but I was doing that every single like hour or two, because the fact that I didn't want it to become stiff. And I feel like that's where a lot of pain comes from with injury. It's that, like you were saying, I can't move my arm like this anymore. I can't move my arm like this because I just was holding it like this while I was injured.
Yeah. So the biggest thing I see is when you look at this, like there's like a sliding scale of like people have some discomfort, stiffness occurs, and then pain ensues. Like there's always like, you ask people like when they hurt their back, like you ever had a stiff back before? Like my back was stiff all the time before I hurt it. So it's really how it is. It gets stiff, and then we get pain, because when you don't move it, you can get the pain signs, all the receptors and everything. It becomes more heightened and sensitive, yada, yada, yada. Back to the car stuff though, rehab based, and I can do passive cars. I can take someone's joint passively through that range of motion.
Which means you're moving.
I'm moving it, right? So if I take their...
I just want to say it because some people who are only just listening to audio, I just want to make sure. Yes.
Yeah, passive means I'm moving it for them. Then I teach them to move it some. Basically try to get them to full of their current range of motion after an injury. That's the real rehab side. Now I can use cars for, I call it joint exploration, or just seeing how much capacity you can move your shoulder in.
Yeah.
I want to see, hey, if you go move your shoulder, you can't get into flexion. You can't move it up here. You can't rotate. So I can assess and then use that as a baseline. As we treat your shoulder, does your ability to move your cars improve? Yeah. So there's acute rehab. There's rehab as like a performance kind of making things move better. And then there's training. Training aspect happens once I know your shoulder can really move in its true capacity.
In that full car, right?
Full car, because there's no point in adding load to something that doesn't move well, right? It's like quarter squatting or half squatting. Yeah. Well, why don't we get you a full squat first and then we add more weight?
Yeah, it's kind of like when I posted me doing Anderson squats and they're like, well, why don't you just do full range of motion? It's just like, well, I can get in that full range of motion. It's just... What I've noticed is at like the midpoint or, the eccentric portion, I am getting stuck and it's a very hard movement. Mm-hmm. And I'm training that motor pattern in my head where it's like, I don't need to be stuck. I should be able to move like fast and strongly. But go ahead, sorry.
No, but I'll do the same thing with the car, right? Like I'll be like, hey, here's the spot that I know you need more work on. You need to get stronger here. You have the motion because you can squat all the way down, but you have to build strength in certain aspects. I'm glad you do that because you differentiate. I need to work this. Yeah. Let's train it.
Yeah.
So you have your acute. I'm going to recap this one more time.
Yeah.
Passive, ankle sprain, shoulder injury, because I'll get people on day one with the shoulder pain and they're just going home and doing like a low level, small circle their shoulder because the best thing to do is movement. Yeah. I'm always trying to find pain for your movement for people. Then I have the performance aspect of like, okay, general maintenance stuff, getting them to move better, making sure their shoulder can move the way a shoulder needs to.
Yeah.
And then I have the training aspect where it's like, I'm blocking them, I'm adding weights, bands, resistance, different holds, and stuff like that. So there's a huge way you can use cars, and I mostly show either the training aspect or just like the general. I try to use my social media just to show the differences. I try to educate as much as I can, but people just building awareness, because I can give it to my 90-year-old grandfather, I can give it to a 10-year-old athlete, I can give it to a college professional athlete. They're so scalable, which is the great thing about it.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, but I could probably just answer this. But for the people who are wondering who the audience is for cars, what I would just recap is like we're talking like injury, what's the middle, and then healthy. What would be just, like
I say more. That's like the stuff that I treat in here, like your rehab based stuff, right? It's people that know they need to get a better movement in their shoulder. And again, every single person can do cars because you're not wrong to get movement in your joints, right? It's like saying everyone can walk.
Yeah.
Theoretically, everyone can, for the most part, right? But it's saying, like, okay, that's still something that everybody can do across the board.
Yeah.
But then we can take it and raise the level of intensity for what I need.
Easy question for you then next. Who needs to do cars?
Literally everybody. Like, I shouldn't say needs, because there's nothing you have to do in terms. Everyone can get benefit from it.
Yeah.
I think every single person can benefit from moving their shoulder in a full range of motion every day. Because what I treat in here is people that lose that because they never did it.
Yeah.
It's seriously, it's use it or lose it, right?
So if you say everybody, then is there? So it doesn't matter if they're CrossFit, bodybuilding, Olympic lifter, power lifter, normal, average Joe. So any of those people.
I get people in here that aren't athletes or don't work out. They do cars because it's going to keep their body from getting stiff and being riddled with pain.
Yeah.
Right? Like all my arthritis patients or rheumatoid arthritis, getting movement in a joint is one of the best ways to put all the good fluid in there. There's the neurological benefit, the muscle benefit, the endocrine benefit. It's movement.
Yeah.
Right?
So what would be, like, can you give an example? Like, because the fact that everyone claims to think that time is so important, can you give an example, or can you give like a good estimate on how long cars should be going for? How long does it take on a daily basis, like a weekly basis? Like, what is your typical time frame for like a person that's on the training side, not rehab? Like, how long should cars last? Is it every day? Is it every couple of days? What's your kind of prescription for that?
So it depends on your goal, right? If your goal is general movement, I want to feel great. I tell people do that full morning routine. It's called the morning routine because you literally can get up and do it. It takes you 5 to 10 minutes tops, and you've touched every single joint in the body and you've moved it. That could be daily. Training, just like anything else. If I'm training my biceps twice a week, maybe 3 times a week, like if we got to get high intensity stuff, you really can't overdo just moving your joint, right? It's like saying I'm going to get up every day, I'm just going to move my knees. Like you get people I just do this because it feels good.
Yeah.
Same idea, now we're just adding some rotational stuff in. So I guess it depends.
Yeah.
But in terms of just general cars, it can be done daily.
And would you say it's like, within like 5-10 minutes?
Oh yeah, it takes a little time to learn them, but then it's like, I'm literally saying if you do it one time on each joint, right? You can spend more time. I get people to do the neck ones and they'll spend 5 minutes just moving their necks. It feels phenomenal to them. Yeah. But if you just touch all that motion, because what you've done is you've told your brain, because this is a funny concept, your brain can't see what's going on, right? Your brain only learns by moving. Yeah. So if you move it, you upload that information to your brain that you still have that range of motion, right? After an injury happens, let's say you break your arm, your brain has no idea what's going on, you immobilize it, the brain doesn't realize that is actually still able to move until you get the movement back, and that's that stiffness and all those things.
I'm glad that you brought that up because that's a good point. I feel like on top of like the car conversation, I think even with me who didn't have any education in this and, been around like the health and fitness industry for like a good amount of time, what I've noticed is like movement is always king for like injury and, getting in that joint in that specific thing, because like I never understood why you'd want to like kind of sit aside, or like your typical, like we talked about in the first one, is like the ice treatment, the heat treatment. Like obviously there's a time and place for that. Exactly. But like why would you want to sit there if you had a stiff ankle or ankle sprain, sit on the couch for 2 days, 3 days straight, and then you wake up on the 4th day and you're like, holy cow, feels like it's like 10 times more painful.
Yes, right. Most of my ankle sprain patients, I mean, they're in here on day 1 or day 2 doing things, and they're back full force in like a week, week and a half, versus not bashing typical medical field, but they might get put in a boot for 2 or 3 weeks, right? And now all of a sudden our rehab starts 3 weeks later. You can start things a lot sooner than you think, and movement is king for most cases.
I don't know how big you are in the fitness industry, but side note, but I don't know if it's like 100% sure. There's this guy named John Venus. He was like a vegan bodybuilder. He actually supposedly, don't know if it's true, guys, so don't quote me on this, but he broke his ankle and they told him he had to have surgery, and he went from like can't even walk to walking on his own without any surgery. Don't know the ins and outs, and this might be above your head, but like he supposedly broke his ankle and didn't use like any surgery or anything, and somehow like his bone just moved back or healed on its own.
So if the bones were still lined up, but the break was just through, possible. It's when they're shifted like that, obviously surgery.
I don't think it was. I was just saying, I don't know if it was like shifted, because like it didn't seem like all too off. So
so if it's technically a break, but it could have been like almost all the way through, or it's like not fully. There's ways. Like I've seen people like with Achilles ruptures or whatever, they've rehabbed it themselves without surgery. It's 100% possible. Human body can do some crazy things if loaded the right way and taught the right things. There's some crazy stories.
Yeah, I just think it's crazy because you said like something about like a boot and stuff. It's like, well, this person broke their ankle and then somehow like jumping on it and walking within like a couple months or whatever.
Wild.
But back to the cars training methodology. You mentioned, bands, weights, other tension. Like, why would you do that compared to like a standard car where it's just body weight? Is it, what are the benefits you see? Like, is it just making more range of motion, more movement in the joint? Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's now strengthening that range of motion, right? Because if we take typical named exercises, it's a lot of linear stuff we do. Our bicep curl, our press, our pull. Not often do we actually work on shoulder internal rotation with extension. So I can add some weight and resistance there to teach all those muscle fibers and whatever's in that joint to gain strength. Yeah. Right? Or at least be aware of that motion we have. Again, if you're only doing the same tissue loaded over and over and over, well, we lose on maybe the rotational stuff. So you can do a car with weight and just adds more benefit for strength.
So you're saying, and you probably mentioned this earlier, but like when you said, if you're a healthy individual and, you can move in that motion, you would suggest then to kind of go into the weighted or bands movements, right?
You can. I would still say, hey, it's best, like, it's hard to give advice without seeing someone.
Yeah.
If you feel like you have it down, I mean, we can isolate the joint more. I don't weight a ton of people with cars. It's more of a higher level thing because it might take people a year or two just get really good at the car itself. Yeah. And I'm telling when people weight it, it's like a pound, half a pound.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I hope no one's
going to take it a 20-pounder. I've done it before. It is brutal.
Can you imagine someone with like a barbell with like 45s on it, just rotating their shoulders?
If someone does that, oh my goodness.
I will give you $100.
Yeah, $100.
Actually, don't do that.
No, we can't do that.
Yeah, we'll see. People on Instagram will be like, now I had to get my shoulder replaced back surgically because it ripped off my arm.
That'll be the next trending challenge on TikTok because of me. That'd be great.
The 135
shoulder card.
By Dr. Kyle Richmond. And they'll just keep tagging you, and then all the lawsuits will start coming in.
That would be the bad part.
Yeah, because like that. Well, because see, the thing is, like, also too, from like a bodybuilding and powerlifting background, like going through those movements, I always believed they were always truly important, right? And I talked about this when you were on the first one, I would use squat shoes all the time because for some reason I couldn't get as deep with like barefoot shoes.
Right.
Now I don't even use squat shoes since we like last talk really. Like I couldn't even tell you the last time I put them on. It's just like insane because like you're talking about like working those movements. Like I taught myself and got myself into that movement because the fact that I was like pushing myself and training in that movement to strengthen that range of motion in that position. So I think that's a really good point because also too, this conversation kind of leads me to the want or the need to actually like go, if I can go through that car, like to add like some resistance, like a band or maybe like a 1 pound or 1.5 pounds. Because see, the thing is in the past, like you would always see, I feel like you'd see like people would be like, well, why would you rotate your shoulder with a 5 pound dumbbell? You're going to hurt yourself.
Right.
I remember also too, I don't know if you want to touch upon this, but the freaking rope rotation from your shoulder. Well, I forgot. It was like, I don't know if it was like a baseball workout thing, but like, I remember there was like a craze where every man and woman would just pull from this and just try to strengthen their shoulder mobility with the
band
the cable.
And stuff.
Yeah, the
cable.
band.
Yep.
And I still see people only doing that. Like, is there a reason why they did that, or are doing that?
That's like your typical rotator cuff thing.
Yeah.
Now, the only thing why that's not the best is because the shoulder, it's ball and socket joint, which means I call it degrees of freedom, which how many degrees that joint can move in its range of motion. Well, your shoulder does that motion here, does it over your head, behind you. It rotates everywhere. So if we lock ourselves down and you can't get a ton of rotation here, you can't get internal because it blocks you, right? If I did that like on the ground and all the way here, the shoulder's meant to move in those motions. Where people get really confused and they go, that's bad for your shoulder. It's bad if you load up with 50 pounds, you've never done it before, and then you do that.
Yeah, I remember I've seen people probably load 50 pounds and was like yanking it. And I'm not even talking about like, like doing it nice and controlled, like a motion that you'd probably suggest. No, it was like yank. And I think, and I don't know if it's because, maybe it's more of a male thing, but like, I don't know if it's because it's the benching craze within the male like genetics, and I don't know why men like just love benching, because like my favorite lift is a deadlift. I honestly
hate benching.
I was just say I'm also bad at benching, so it's like I could care less about benching. I'd rather do cable flies because it feels like my chest is getting more of an exercise. But like I feel like that was to combat like all the bench pressing men do, and it's obviously not a prescripted like movement, right?
Right.
Like if you had a client that benched 5 days a week, you wouldn't prescribe just that, right?
No, that's insane to me. I don't get it.
One question for you about cars, like you ever think about like releasing like any like sample like programs on cars, like for the public to either purchase or like download?
I want to get in that realm of like programs. I have some I'm working on that I'd like. I want to use programs like an easy way of entry into what I do, right?
Yeah.
You don't either have the time, resources, whatever it is to work with me one-on-one, but you want to get started on something. I have for free on YouTube the CARS routine, which I talk through every single one. Right?
Yeah.
I explain what they all are. I'm starting to have programs where if you want general mobility stuff, if you want more shoulder, more hip base, I'm going to put those out for purchase very soon in the near future here. But my always biggest thing is like if you have a certain point of concern, I think coming in and getting assessed, because then I'll give you the exact things. You're not wasting time. If it's I just want to feel better, I have no aches, no pains or anything, general programming is awesome. If you know you have a shoulder thing that's kind of, you can play with CARS, but then I can tease out the whole rest of it. But no, I will have some stuff for purchase soon, or even just putting more free content out, because I have no problem putting free content, because at least lets you learn something, and then something else comes up, you know where to go.
Yeah, I only ask because it's like, I feel like, especially with like the lifting community, they're more or less like willing to like, you know, get into like your pocket when it, not like per se pocket, but like your pocket of information, not like pocket for like money, like pocket for information if you do stuff like that. Because like, you know, I always think about like I said back when I said shy people who are just afraid to like come in here in person, but they just want to work on their hips. Well, here's Dr. Kyle Richmond's hip program for CARS, and you know that this will, you know, help you get a basic start. This will help you get, you know, basic routine going on so you can have hip freedom per se. So awesome. Did you want to talk about, what other things did you want to talk about with CARS that you think that's important that we kind of missed out? Did you miss out on anything?
I think we hit it all. I mean, we hit the big overarching for, I'd say, all of it.
Okay, cool. Because like, as I say, I think this is a great one because like I said, someone like me, and like, yes, I'm kind of selfish, and it's nice because I can get this information, but I know for someone like me also too, lifting, you know, 8-9 years ago, this information wasn't out there. Like Kelly Starrett was out there, but it was like podcasts were like hard to find. You know, Spotify was like very introduction. Like, Apple Podcasts was sort of out there, because I'm trying to think, like, I mean, podcasts had to start like 8 or 9 years ago. And
it was like, no one really listened to them. It was kind of like, all this information it was hard to find things. That's why like Instagram blowing up, and YouTube's been around, but now it's easier to kind of find your pockets of information. Podcasts are huge though. So it's like I said, 8 or 9 years ago, someone like me, I just never really paid attention too much about this. Like, I was just in the gym doing chest on Mondays, legs on Fridays, you know, all the stuff in between, and that's it. Like, honestly, I'm at a point where I'm so blessed that I didn't end up getting hurt really bad. I think the biggest industry in my lifting career was like a pinched nerve in my back, which if you look at my old deadlift videos, I could tell you why. I would just lose total core stability in my trunk, where I would just and I could tell you that's probably what it was, because I always loved deadlifting, but I could just tell you, it's just like, it was such a terrible movement to see. And some of you guys, I'm an open book, and I think that's what's nice about like information, is you learn over time. But awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. You came here. Hey, you did the work.
Yes, I did make my way out, but Kyle's also like 15 minutes away, so don't make it seem like he's actually saying that I took a flight here. I booked a private jet
they don't need to know that.
Yeah, they don't need to know that yet. My chauffeur is actually outside the door with my champagne bottle, so I don't even drive myself anymore. But no, awesome. Again, like I said, I'm gonna put his clinic here, that where he's working locally. I'll put all his information like I did before, so you can reach out. You can come here personally if you are local, or if you want to just chat. Honestly, DM Kyle. He's not gonna. I'm telling you, he's a very open guy, and he somehow responds to me all the time, which is insane because I feel like you're busy all the time. So I'm just glad to have someone like him in our back pocket, where we can do stuff like this, collaborate, and kind of talk about things. So also too, if you're listening, we'll challenge you on this. Why don't you guys give some topics that you want to see Kyle talk about? Because like, even like the linear movements, like stuff like that, like I would love to just dive deep in something like that personally. But like, whoever's listening out there, DM Kyle, DM me, write a comment. Tell us what you want to see next, because I know Kyle wants to produce more content, and I know he likes doing these things to help you guys out. And as you can tell, he's here to help you out, even if you don't want to book a session with him. Yeah. Even though that sounds kind of bad, because it's
but it's like the more people can learn and understand, and then like realize that I'm a source of information for them, somewhere down the line, you might refer somebody in. Yeah. Someone gets help, right? Because I don't want to keep everything behind a paywall. That doesn't help anybody.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much again.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys in the next one. Please like, comment, share, and we'll catch you later. Okay. Thank you, sir.